Hey you! Are you a VTuber? Are you sick of Windows shoving all the AI garbage and broken updates down your throat? Wait, you're not? Well, let me show you how to become a VTuber on Linux anyway, at least the way I figured it out. Pleased to meet you. I'm Indigo Mizumi, and I'm a VTuber on Twitch and YouTube, sometimes. I do this as a hobby mainly, and while I do primarily stream via Windows, I have also been an on and off Linux user over the years and have more recently learned how to stream via Linux, so I might as well show others how to, even if I'm by no means the first. Anyway, let's just jump right in, shall we? Anyway, our first step in this whole process, if you don't already have Linux installed, is to, well, install Linux. In general, there's no wrong way to go about this, but if you're a newcomer to Linux, I and a lot of people will recommend Linux Mint as the first distribution you try out, and since that's the one I actually have on my main desktop and what I've used for streaming from, that's the one I'll be using as an example for this tutorial. I like Mint because of the Cinnamon desktop. It looks pretty and it's pretty straightforward to use if you're coming off Windows. Alternatively, if you're insane, you could install something like Arch or Gen 2. Has anyone actually figured out how to become a VTuber on TinyCore? Anyway, you just go to the website linuxmint.com and download the ISO and flash it to a USB drive. I already have the ISO downloaded, so that'll save like 20 minutes downloading it. So now in order to flash it to a USB drive, there are various programs out there like Belina Etcher, which is cross-platform. I believe you can get it on Mac. I know for sure you can get it on Linux, and you can in fact flash from a URL, but since I already have it downloaded. And then select don't overwrite my external hard drives. And then click flash. I'm not going to show the whole process on screen, but if you're on Windows, you can use Rufus, which is also simple to use. Pick a USB drive from the drop-down, pick your ISO, and usually the default settings are good enough, and click OK, and it'll flash for you. Again, I'm not going to show the whole process, but alternatively, you could just download a Steam Deck. I know what I said, and remove the entire step of installing Linux completely, but where's the fun in that? Anyway, once the image is flashed to your USB flash drive, then you can actually go boot into the Linux live environment. So, we'll see you there on Linux. Now that you've successfully flashed your favorite breed of penguin onto your USB drive, now it's time to actually install the thing, unless you're using Arch or something. Installing Linux isn't any more difficult than it is to install Windows these days. So in order to actually get into the boot menu, you have to press the delete key or one of the function keys. It'll depend on your computer's BIOS to get into the boot options. And then once you're there, you should be able to select your USB drive. And to demonstrate the whole installation process, for the sake of convenience, I'm going to be doing this via VirtualBox. So I think I almost accidentally shut down my real computer there. Anyway, and then just start Linux Mint. Alright, and if you want to dual boot Windows in Linux, you can, but first you actually have to partition the disk. So you go to the disk utility here, then you can click resize, and I don't know, let's allocate it to say 20 gig. And there we go, 15 gigs of free space. I mean, of course, if you're doing this on a real computer, you probably have much more storage space than this, but this is just a virtual machine and I slapped together for the purposes of this. Anyway, install. Now you could erase the entire disk, but for the sake of this, I'm going to show you how you can have both. Select this free space. Just select whatever file system you want. I'm just going to select ext4 and then click install now. Oh, no root file system is defined. Oops. Change the mount, just put the mount point to there, and no EFI system partition. Alright. I'm just going to install it anyway and see what happens. I've decided to just hose Windows on this virtual machine, and because it was stuck. You get the gist. I ended up rerunning the installer, and installation has failed. Or no, it has finished. And then you've got Linux Mint installed. Now I imagine it's a whole lot harder to get dual boot on a virtual machine, considering that it's not really meant for this, but I think you get the gist now. Anyway, I'll go see you on my real Linux machine. Alright, now that you've successfully installed Linux on your computer and accidentally deleted System32 in the process, now it's time to actually get your VTuber stuff up and running on Linux. Now, some of the software doesn't natively run on Linux, but for our purposes, that will not be a hindrance. Now, for this tutorial, I'll be demonstrating Face Tracker and VTube Studio, since that's what I use to VTube on Linux. Now, in general, when it comes to software distribution on Linux, it's a massive patchwork of crap, including various package management systems, which more or less determines each distro family, and multiple agnostic methods, including AppImage, Flatpak. Now, for our purposes, that will not be an issue, because Linux Mint comes pre-installed with Flatpak, and Face Tracker is distributed via Flatpak. Now, how do you get Face Tracker? Well, download this file, and then click it and open it up in your software manager on Mint, and then just install, since I already have it installed, so I don't need to go through that, but it's quite easy. And then VTube Studio, well, you can install that via Steam. It's just right here. So there's no native Linux version of VTube Studio, but that will not hinder us, since these days the Linux version of Steam has the alcoholic wizardry of the Proton compatibility layer, which just makes a lot of the Windows those games and software just work on Linux anyway. Now, in order to get your live 2D model into VTube Studio, it works more or less the same way as it does on Linux. You just right-click here, go to Browse Local Files, VTube Studio Data, Streaming Assets, Live 2D Models, and just paste the folder for it in here, like here I am right here. Tonight at 11. Then what we're going to do is open up Face Tracker. It should be installed under here, and then now I already have it running, but then you just select your webcam, select your tracking your video, and your tracking settings. The server settings will not matter, and then click this to start. If it's red, that means the Face Tracker is actively running, and then once you're in VTube Studio, make sure this is set. The camera is set to OpenC Face. Tracking quality is set to whatever you want, as long as it's not RTX on. Otherwise, it won't work. And then you can mess with this however you want. Like I set it to RTX on, and it doesn't work, so you'll want it set to. Now that you've gotten your VTuber model properly working on Linux, you're going to want to stream, right? Well, of course, you're going to want to download OBS, but this is where things get a little quirky compared to how things work on Windows. OBS, of course, has a native Linux version, but for some reason, a lot of the native packages lack access to the browser source option. And so I think even OBS themselves officially recommend you go for the Flatpak. So that's the version I use. Like if you go into the software manager on Linux Mint, you'll notice two different OBS packages. This is the native system package, but you'll want the Flatpak, which is the one I have installed. Now, if you use any plugins on OBS, that means things are going to be a little screwy, but I have found a way, specifically this tutorial. So what you want to do is you go into your settings folder, and then it's under and then there should be a folder there called plugins. And then as you can see, there's a specific folder structure. Now if there isn't a plugins folder, you just create one. But if you want to get the actual plugins into there, that's where you'll have to manually extract the package file yourself. So what you do is here's the deb package for the multiple RTMP outputs plugin for OBS, which is one of the plugins that I do use myself. It's how I multi-stream to Twitch and YouTube. Instead of opening with the package installer, you open this with the archive manager, and then you go. So you go here, user, lib, this, OBS plugins. So you create the folder, and then in the bin, 64-bit, you put the .so file in there. And then data will... And then the locale folder will be in the share folder in the archive, and then it should work. Like if you, as long as you follow this general path, it should work. Now, unfortunately, I couldn't get local vocal to work, but now I think some packages for OBS plugins will have proper flat packs, but this specific one doesn't, so you'll have to follow this tutorial. A little unintuitive at first, but once it's in, it works quite well. Pardon the pit of endless OBS, but when it comes to importing your profiles and scenes from the Windows version, I do not recommend doing that. You're better off just rebuilding your entire scene collection from scratch. Now, some of the stuff like browser sources can carry over, like you'll specifically want the flat pack if you want browser sources, but other stuff like if you'll want to rebuild from scratch, because capturing specific windows on Linux does not work the same way as it does in Windows. Like, game capture isn't really a thing on Linux version of OBS the same way it is on Windows, so that's why I recommend just rebuilding from scratch. And unfortunately, there's no capture audio option like there is on the Windows version, so you'll have to capture the audio for each thing separately. But once you get it set up, it does work. It's just relatively unintuitive to get the flat pack version set up with the plugins and such, but once you have that set up, you could go through all your settings as usual, and then just set up OBS however you like, and then well, click start streaming. But anyways, that's more or less how you stream on Linux as a VTuber. Once you get past the specific quirks of, well, using OBS on Linux compared to how things work on Windows, it's actually quite easy. But anyways, thanks for watching this tutorial, and, well, I hope to see you on the airwaves.